everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about the job that I worked during the 2 gap years that I took between undergrad and medical school. And how I'll structure this video is I'll first talk about why I took 2 gap years between undergrad and medical school. I'll talk about how I decided what kind of job to do during those 2 gap years. I will talk about what the job that I did involved, and I'll also give you some tips for anyone else who may want to do the same kind of thing that I did in their gap years, just some tidbits of wisdom I can pass on to you from my experience. So first, I decided to take 2 gap years before medical school as I was not ready to start applying while I was still in my undergrad classes. So if you want to take no gap years, I believe you have to apply during your junior year. I believe it's your junior year. And then if you want to take 1 gap year, you can apply during your senior year. I didn't want to rush into this whole thing. I felt like I only wanted to do the application process once, and I wanted to make sure the application was as good as I could make it and putting my very best foot forward. So I was really busy in undergrad with my classes, with extracurriculars, and I decided that was not the time to work on a medical school application. And then during my senior year, again, it was busy. We had a lot going on. I still didn't feel like I was totally prepared. And I also thought that having some time to work after undergrad just financially would be helpful, because everyone knows you're paying for your tuition for undergrad, and then you're going into this huge financial commitment of medical school, which will put you, for most people, even further into debt. And I thought if I could even just have some money to buy groceries with, I wanted to just be in a little bit of a better financial situation going into medical school. And lastly, I knew that I had worked really hard in undergrad, and I knew I was going to work extremely hard in medical school. And for my own just mental health, well-being, attempt to not be burnt out, I thought it would be smart to just take some time, work a normal job with normal hours, and just be able to live a little bit before embarking on that really intense journey of medical school. So I decided to take these gap years, so I wanted to apply to jobs that were going to give me good experience for going into medicine, not just to put on my application, but just so I would know what I like, what things I'm interested in. A lot of people may choose to do direct patient care experience type jobs, so you could be an EMT or a CNA or work in a hospital doing that type of job where you're directly caring for patients. The reason I didn't do that during my gap years is I had already done that kind of job during undergrad. So I had gotten my EMT certification, I think the summer after my sophomore year of college, and I started working in the emergency department of a hospital as an ED technician, or an emergency department technician. So that's how I used my EMT license, and that was essentially you can think of it as a CNA in the emergency room. So I was doing EKGs, splinting for patients with broken extremities, helping the nurses with whatever they might have needed, wound clean out, things like that. So that was an amazing experience that I really enjoyed, and I honestly would have kept doing it, but I knew that I had done that for a good chunk of time, maybe a little more than a year, and I knew that I liked it. And I thought, okay, I know I like direct patient care, that's an important thing to know, but now what are some other aspects of medicine that I want to explore before jumping into medical school? So research was something that I had experience in undergrad in a microbiology research lab, but that was bench research, wet lab research, where you're sitting at a lab bench, pipetting, making bacterial cultures, but it wasn't related to people directly. I like when I can apply things directly to people and see how it can help people. So I thought clinical research would be a great experience for me. And I didn't have a specific specialty that I wanted to do clinical research in. I kind of just threw my application out to as many available positions as I could find. I just wanted to see what was out there, and I was really open to anything. So I ended up deciding on a job that was in pulmonary research, and it was at a hospital in Boston, which is where I wanted to be. So I started working that job, and it was an amazing experience. In research, the position that I was doing was a clinical research assistant. So what this position is generally is you are working under a PI, or a principal investigator, who is usually a physician, and you are helping them essentially run their studies smoothly. So they're busy with all the work that they're doing day to day, and you're there to just kind of do the, I don't want to say brunt work, but the stuff that they kind of don't have, the little minutia that they don't have time to do, which it seems small, but it can fill a whole position and fill your time just trying to keep up with all the different stuff that needs to be done for these studies. For example, in my position, there were several different things that you always had to kind of keep running. Like, one was recruitment for the studies. You always had to be mailing out to people, calling to follow up with people who might be interested, and you always want to have that inflow of patients that are interested in participating in the research studies. That was a really important part of my job. I would also run the patient visits when they would come in for the study. So we'd be collecting data, like doing walking tests, breathing tests, like spirometry. Those were a little less prevalent just because of everything going on with COVID, so we put those on hold for a while. But yeah, asking the patients questions. They have self-report type stuff, so surveys that we would administer. Phlebotomy was part of it. I had experience with that from my EMT days, so I would do phlebotomy to collect blood samples, things like that. So aside from the recruitment, the collecting data, day to day, I would just be, if any of the participants needed information or if they had questions, I'd be in contact with the study participants very regularly. Data entry is a big part of a clinical research assistant's job. So you collect all the data, but then you need to enter the data so you can then analyze the data. We would just kind of organize all of the study materials, like the primary documents that the patients were filling out, pay the subjects for their time if it was a paid study. Sometimes we had to coordinate with other studies that were recruiting off of our study, so that's something you may have to coordinate with other research assistants or other investigators. One thing that was cool was I got to interact with several other physicians around in order to get medical clearance for these patients to participate in the studies. So you do have, depending on what type of study you're doing, you could have some interaction with several different healthcare providers. Lastly, I would train any new research assistants that came on, train them on the job. There's a lot to know, so it takes a while to train people on those kinds of things. But yeah, that's essentially what I was doing. A mixture of that plus anything else that needed to be done to just make sure the studies were running smoothly. And as a disclaimer, these research jobs, even just from looking at the job postings when I was applying to the jobs, the responsibilities vary a lot. So you could be doing mostly recruitment in some positions, like calling and mailing, and some positions recruit directly from the hospital, so you'll be going to the emergency room to recruit patients who've come in with a certain condition, or you'll recruit from inpatient wards of certain patients. So that can be interesting too if that recruitment process is a little more involved too. Okay, so now for some tips that I have for people who may be interested in working as a clinical research assistant. First, something that I actually did look for when I was applying for these jobs, which I'm happy that I did, is how closely you get to work with the PI of your study, or the physician whose study it is. So I was actually between two different jobs when I was deciding which job to take. And one of them, it was obvious that you'd be in much less close contact with the physicians compared to the other job. So I took the job that stressed working directly with the physician and having that physician available to always answer questions and lead you if you needed some guidance. And I'm really glad that I chose that job. So something you can even ask about in your interviews is, how closely do I work with the PI, or how much interaction do I have with the PI on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis? And if it seems like you don't really come in contact much with the PI and they're doing their own thing like far away and you're just running the studies, it can be fine, but it also could be a little more overwhelming, a little less of that mentorship from the PI. Like the doctor that I worked under, really, it was important to her that she mentored the clinical research assistants in whatever they were interested in. So if we were interested in going to medical school, she wanted to give us as much information and experience as we could get to then progress on to medical school. That's something that you definitely want to consider. Will this job really help you get to the next place that you're going to, like medical school? Another thing to check about for a position you may be interested in is the recruitment goals, or how strict they are about the recruitment goals. So I think there are some positions that are a lot more hardcore with how many people you have to recruit, like each month, say. So there's like a set number that you have to meet, and if you don't meet that number, I'm not sure what happens, but it's more pressure on you to find people to sign up. For some reason, there's months of the year or times of the year when people are just a lot less likely to participate in certain research studies for whatever reasons. And if you have those set recruitment goals that are looming over you and you always have to meet them, that can just be an added stress to your life. Where I was working, we wanted to keep recruitment up and we wanted to get as many subjects recruited as we could, but there was never like a number we had to hit, which I was grateful for. We just wanted to keep it going, do as best as we could to maintain that inflow of patients. At the hospital that I worked at, there were also every so often different like learning opportunities that you could attend, and one good example were the grand rounds for the hospital. So since COVID, they put them all online and they were like Zoom type meetings, and just attending those was so informative, and there were so many different topics discussed at the different grand rounds, so much I learned. And when you can attend those different things, you can gain so much more from that position. If the position that you're looking at has those extra opportunities for learning, experiencing different clinical environments, that is really great. This goes along with the relationship that you have with your PI or how closely you work with them, but one thing that my PI did was give everyone a chance to have an independent project. She would either help you come up with a topic, or you could, even if there was a topic you were interested in having to do with our research, you could do your own analyzing of past data we've used, and then kind of go your own way to do your independent project and then write a paper on what you studied. So that was a really amazing opportunity that if you can find somewhere that encourages that type of thing, that's a really great experience. And lastly, something you could think about is the specialty that you're doing the research in. So like I said, I was open to any specialty and I really didn't have any expectations. But if there's a specialty that you think you're really interested in, like that you may want to specialize in down the road, this could be a really great time to get experience in that specialty and even maybe see if it's not what you thought it was, and then that's even a good way to rule it out and you can move on to find another one you may like. Or if it's something that you end up loving in the research, you can continue the research in medical school and pursue that specialty even long term, but it's a really good way to get exposure to different specialties. All right, so I think that covers basically everything about my experience in my job during my 2 gap years. I would definitely recommend working in clinical research. Obviously, I think you can tell from this video that it was a really great experience for me, and this shouldn't be the only reason you do it, but I had a lot to talk about during my medical school applications from my experience in this job. A lot to write about, a lot to talk about. There was so much I learned, and now I know going forward that I want to continue participating in research during school and hopefully in my chosen specialty later on. So I hope this video was helpful for anyone maybe trying to decide what to do with your gap year or multiple gap years. And if you guys have any other specific questions, feel free to leave a comment, and don't forget to like and subscribe down below, and I'll be back with the next video soon.